Plus, what about our local impacts? And how about the weekend forecast? Weather straight ahead. Stick around.
We've got all aspects of Hurricane Sandy covered, including what's happening in the Northeast and how our area is also being affected and getting ready to help. And after a serious search for a missing man, another serious situation is forming as investigators say an online video has surfaced and it may have stemmed from a prank. We're glad you're with us tonight. I'm Lynn Brooks.
And I am Terri Brewer. A big portion of the country is bracing for a huge storm, and even though Hurricane Sandy isn't headed this way, it doesn't mean we won't feel some of the effects.
All of that, including the latest on the storm and the forecast, is in our top story at 5. We have video from the New York pier where waves are whipping the pier. It's already washed away a part of the Atlantic City boardwalk and is threatening to cripple New York's subway system with a huge surge of seawater. From Washington to Boston, subways, buses, trains, and schools are shut down. Hundreds of thousands of people are under orders to move to higher ground. So what's the latest forecast for Sandy, and what about any effect on our weather here at home? Here now, Chief Meteorologist Richard Scott.
Hey, Lynn and Terri, good Monday afternoon to you. Hurricane Sandy, an enormous storm wind sustained 90 now, starting to make landfall in southern New Jersey. And just kind of put a reference how big this storm is. It goes from Maine all the way down to parts of the southern Appalachian Mountains. In fact, South Carolina getting some rain off of this thing. So an enormous storm, a large tropical storm force wind and hurricane force wind field now. I had a wind gust of 117 on top of Mount Washington. That's up in New Hampshire, but again, that's a higher elevation, obviously. So wind gusts down at the ground level, at sea level, still very high out there. So a big storm to talk about. Winds here right now in Tuscaloosa will have 58 degrees. It is a windy and cold day. Quickly, here's that forecast tonight, down to 38 at midnight. So the cold air is moving in thanks to Sandy. We'll talk about the rest of the forecast. Plus, we'll look at Halloween. Home team weather straight ahead, so stick around.
About 60 million people in the U.S. are doing their best to prepare for Hurricane Sandy, but it's a tough task as the storm is gaining strength.
Kareen Khalid is in New York with a look at what's happening so far and what is still to come.
The storm is intensifying along the East Coast, the worst of its kind in nearly a century.
This is the most catastrophic event that we have faced and been able to plan for in any of our lifetimes.
Hurricane Sandy could be historic, seen here stretching up the Atlantic from the International Space Station, with crashing waves and flooding hours before the worst of the storm arrives. One early casualty, the HMS Bounty. The ship sank about 90 miles off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. The Coast Guard rescued 14 crew members. 2 are missing. Meanwhile, officials urge those on land, evacuate if you are asked, stay home if you're not.
Conditions are deteriorating very rapidly, and the window for you getting out safely is closing.
Heeding the warning, and we're going. And I'm hoping that I have a house when I come back.
This was rush hour in New York City, a shut-down transit system here. In Washington and Boston, Connecticut state highways closed, and obstacles on the campaign trail too. President Obama left Florida to head straight to Washington to deal with the storm.
We are certain that this is going to be a slow-moving process through a wide swath of the country, and millions of people are going to be affected.
Their families in harm's way that will be hurt, either in their possessions or perhaps in something more severe.
300,000 people are without power tonight, already Sandy taking its toll. In Battery Park City, Karen Khalid.
One FEMA model shows this storm has the potential to cause up to $3 billion in wind damage alone. That doesn't factor in flooding damage. Hurricane Sandy has killed at least 67 people so far, most of them as Haiti, as it went through the Caribbean last week. Well, disaster is something Alabama is familiar with, and organizations across the state are preparing to send relief to the East Coast.
The American Red Cross has over 160 emergency response vehicles in place on the coast. West Alabama had 2 volunteers leave this afternoon in the Tuscaloosa response truck. The volunteers are headed to Princeton, New Jersey, where they will serve hot meals, first aid, and give out bottled waters. Holly Maxwell with the West Alabama chapter of the Red Cross says the April 27th tornado has us all ready to help others in a state of emergency.
I'll tell you, here in Alabama, our volunteers are a lot more prepared than they were perhaps
prior to the April 27th storms. Certainly, with our state being so devastated by such catastrophic events, we had volunteers who responded. We had more who decided that they wanted to be trained.
We'll have more on the American Red Cross truck departure and an interview with one student from Maryland who says the hurricane is a full circle moment for her and her family after the April 27th tornado last year.
A group of Alabama high school students is stuck in Sandy's path. The Spain Park mock trial team is in New York City competing in an international competition. The teacher says she tried to move the team's flight up, but it was canceled. She says the group is safe in a hotel and the students have been able to contact their parents. And speaking of travel, Amtrak has canceled its services along the East Coast and the South at least through tomorrow. This affects the station in Tuscaloosa. Amtrak says they will refund people affected. The company has also agreed to help customers reschedule rides and has agreed to pay the difference in fares. And a spokesperson for the Birmingham Shuttlesworth International Airport says Birmingham is already experiencing flight delays and cancellations. She says anyone traveling should contact your airline before going to the airport to see if your flight has been canceled. You can find the contact information on the Birmingham Airport's website. And stay with all editions of WVUA News for continuing coverage of Hurricane Sandy and its impact on the Northeast, as well as any effects on our area. In Tuscaloosa County, investigators are now saying the search for someone who jumped from a bridge stemmed from a prank, but they're pursuing some very serious consequences.
The Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office says the search ended this morning when this YouTube video surfaced of a white male jumping from the Northport toll bridge into the Black Warrior River. Sergeant Andy Norris says the male in the video has since turned himself in. Authorities are interviewing him. Norris says the suspect could face federal charges by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers because of the lengthy search for him. Norris says not only could a jump from this height severely injure someone, but it's also illegal.
If you're going to do something like this and you think it's cool to wear one of these cameras on your head, maybe a GoPro camera or something of that nature, and you're going to post it on YouTube, you might get your 15 minutes of fame, but we're going to come after you, whether it be criminally or civilly, in this case also federally.
Aside from charges from the Corps of Engineers, the Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office is seeking repayment for their search. Norris says the suspect could face further state charges as well.
On your Crime Watch, what started as a noise complaint ended with one man accused of attempted murder. Tuscaloosa police say they got a call on a noise complaint around 1:30 this morning on 1st Avenue. Officers ended up chasing one of the men on the scene. Tuscaloosa police say 21-year-old Henry Patrick McGee Jr. fired a shot at an officer. Officers were able to find McGee with the help of a search dog. No one was injured. McGee is charged with one count of attempted murder. He is in the Tuscaloosa County Jail on $60,000 bond. On your election watch, just 8 days until the November 6th election. But the deadline to register for an absentee ballot is this week.
You have until November 1st by 5 p.m. to register for an absentee ballot. You have until noon on Election Day to turn it in, and you must turn it in yourself. If you mail in your absentee ballot, it must be postmarked by November 5th. The deadline to register to vote has already passed.
Coming up next, home team weather. Very windy this afternoon. Winds gusting between 25 and 35. When will the wind settle down? Your forecast is coming up.
Cold and windy out here on Sorority Road, but some kids are having a whole lot of fun. Coming up a little bit later in the show, I'll be chatting with an officer from Tuscaloosa's Police Department about having fun safely on Halloween.
And the Crimson Tide defense flexed its muscles against Mississippi State this past Saturday night. Gary Harris will have a story for you in Alabama's home team sports.